Like a dream in the night, as the snow settles white, there's a fire burning bright in Massachusetts, and there's a house upon a hill that keeps us from the chill, and by the grace of God we will be in Massachusetts. You can tell me about the times you spent in the Rockies and on the plains. Please don't think that I'm the last to say that there ain't lots of other places in this world that still remain beautiful and unchanged. They're just not the same. Now, if you could only see, I know you would agree, there ain't nowhere else to be like Massachusetts.
Heroes and Heartaches. A treasury of Boston sports since 1975. From the sixth game of the 1975 World Series, Boston has been a focal point of high drama in American sports. The Red Sox, of course, are only one part of a sports story that is filled with heroes and heartaches. For New England fans, the names and events remain forever vivid. But 1975 is only the beginning, and in this tale, it's only fitting that the fans tell the story. So let's listen now to the Sports Huddle radio program of January 18th, 1987, when the fans of New England recalled their memorable moments.
The idea is for you to personally recall the great sporting events, the highlights and the lowlights and the fun times that you've had as a sports fan in New England since 1975. 266-1100, you're next on WHDH.
Hello, Eddie. How you doing?
Fine. How's yourself?
Fine. I got a list of highlights for the Red Sox over the past 11 years, and I got lowlights also. Highlight was certainly Fisk's home run in the sixth game. The lowlight, the ground ball going through Bill Buckner's legs. Dwight Evans' catch in the game 6 as a highlight. A lowlight, Joe Morgan's little looper off of Jim Burton in game 7. Highlight, Bernie Carbo's home run to tie up the game in game 6. Lowlight, Bucky Dent's home run off Mike Therese in the 1978 playoff game. And a highlight, Yaz 3,000th hit of his career, which pretty much is going to put him in the Hall of Fame. And a lowlight, as far as I'm concerned, is Yaz Day, because he played 23 seasons and never saw a championship.
In 1975, Fenway Park opened its doors to Boston's first World Series in 8 years. The Red Sox had swept Oakland to win the pennant, and though they were built to the comforts of Fenway, they had fashioned a strong pitching staff. Still, Darrell Johnson and the Sox looked overmatched against the brilliant Cincinnati Reds. But any fears of a lopsided series were dispelled in the first 5 games. Still, no one could have predicted the events of Game 6 at Fenway Park. The first shockwaves hit in the bottom of the 8th when Bernie Carbo pinch hit with 2 out. The Sox down 6-3 and 2 runners on.
Deep center field, way back, we're tied up.
I was so excited, I was running around third base and I'm yelling to Pete, Pete, don't you wish you were this strong? Oh, don't you wish you were this strong? And Pete's saying, this is fun, this is what World Series play is about.
Carbo's sudden smash tied the score. And then in the top of the 11th, Dwight Evans dashed Cincinnati hopes by foiling Joe Morgan's home run bid. The long and absorbing drama was exhausted when Carlton Fisk led off the bottom of the 12th, somewhere after midnight.
There it goes, a long drive. If it stays fair, home run.
The time and the place and every detail of this event would be retold again and again throughout New England. For the record, Boston won 7-6, and whirling with anticipation, took the Reds to a 7th game. In the finale, the Red Sox appeared to be closing in on a stirring upset when they led 3-0 after 5 innings. But the Reds came back to even the score. And then in the top of the 9th, still tied, Joe Morgan stepped up with 2 on and 2 out. Morgan's bloop single put the Reds up 4-3. And in the bottom of the 9th, Boston's last hope rested fittingly on Carl Yastrzemski. But the Red Sox were finished as Yaz ended the series and the Reds ended a 34-year stretch without a World's Championship. As for the Sox, 57 years and counting. In 1978, Red Sox fortunes were back on the rise. In mid-July, Boston held a convincing 14-game lead in the East, thanks in large measure to the smoldering stick of Jim Rice. Besides a league-best 46 homers and 139 RBIs, Rice would win the MVP with more total bases than any American leaguer in 41 years. It looked like Red Sox all the way, but then the tide turned in late July. Boston lost 11 out of 14, and its lead dwindled to 4.5 games. While the Red Sox were sinking, however, the Yankees were rising through the East by winning 12 of 16. The plot thickened considerably in early September when the two rivals met at Fenway for a critical series. With the Sox clinging to a 4-game lead, the Yankees lifted their Fenway curse and put the Red Sox through an excruciating 4 games in which they swept Boston by a combined score of 42-9 and outhit the Sox 67-21. When the Boston Massacre finally ended, the Yankees had pulled even with the Red Sox.
78, I didn't see as a Red Sox collapse. I saw it as a tremendous comeback by the Yankees. We had to win 13 out of our last 14 games after we blew the lead. So we won 13 out of the last 14 games.
Rick Waits helped Boston's cause on the last day of the season, and Louis Tiant gave a heroic performance by beating Milwaukee to put Boston in a tie with New York and force a 1-game playoff to settle the season. In Red Sox country, the playoff game against Boston's long-standing rivals carried so much weight, the anticipation was almost unbearable. The game, of course, lived up to its promise. It was a heart-stopper that saw Don Zimmer and company with a 2-0 lead in the 7th. Mike Torres seemed to have matters in hand when, with 2 on and 2 out, New York's number 9 hitter Bucky Dent came up, hitting .243 with 4 homers. The heavy air of expectation in Fenway lifted a bit when Dent brought the count to 1-1 and Red Sox worries nearly to rest. But sometimes, when you least expect it...
Bucky Dent, long fly ball left field. And tell it goodbye.
Deep to left. Yastrzemski will not get it. It's a home run.
When he first hit the ball, I thought it was an out. I just kept going back. And then when it slid over the wall, it just almost nicked the back part of the wall. I couldn't believe it. I didn't think it was going to be a home run. We talked about loving Fenway Park so much. It's probably the one time that I hated Fenway Park on the Bucky Dent home run.
Just when the Red Sox thought they would finally lick their hated rivals, fate had intervened. New York scored another run in the inning, and then Reggie Jackson, a more likely long ball threat, led off the 8th with a crushing blow that put the Yankees ahead 5-2. Though Fenway hearts caved in, the Red Sox mounted a comeback of their own. They scored 1 run in the 8th, and Freddie Lynn brought home another as Boston cut the deficit to 1. Still 1 run down in the last of the 9th, the Sox put a runner on first, and then Jerry Remy hit a line drive that momentarily froze Lou Piniella. But he recovered from the sun's glare to keep Rick Burleson at second, a play that would haunt Boston moments later on a would-be sacrifice fly. Now with 2 out and the tying run on third, reliever Rich Gossage took a long, hard look at the man who'd already driven in 2 runs.
7-8 came down. There was a situation I wanted to be in. Gossage was on the mound. Men on first and third, 2 outs. All I was thinking is base it to right field, use the hole, ground ball. I had to pitch exactly what I wanted. I just couldn't get the head of the bat out there. The ball exploded on me. But I don't regret that because I did exactly what I wanted to. I went after the pitch I wanted to. I just tipped my hat to Gossage because his ball was so alive and exploded. He beat me at that particular time.
And the lights all went down in Massachusetts.
Yastrzemski may have failed in the 9th inning that day, but at the age of 39 and in his 18th season, he was still one of the game's dominant players. Though an exquisite left fielder, Yaz loved nothing more than what he called the pressure-filled moments at bat. That, he said, is when no one can help you.
I wasn't the greatest power hitter that ever lived, but yet I hit 400 and some home runs. I wasn't the greatest average hitter that ever lived, but yet I had 3,400 some odd hits. I drove in almost 1,900 runs. I scored almost 1,900 runs. I played pretty good defensive baseball in left field. So you put it all together, for a person my size, I'm very proud of my accomplishments. Like I said, I would have loved to have been 6'2", 6'3", and then see what I could have done at this game.
What Yastrzemski did was collect the trophies of a brilliant career in which he became the only player ever to have 3,000 hits and 400 home runs.
Here's the pitch to Yaz. A long drive to right field. It's gone. Number 400. No doubt about it. There it goes. Number 400 for Carl Yastrzemski. There goes a ground ball. Base hit. Number 3,000. Yastrzemski's got it. And all hell breaks loose at Fenway Park.
In a career that spanned 23 seasons, Yaz was already a legend while still in the game. By 1986, Captain Carl had called it quits, and Boston would have to chart a new pennant course all alone. New heroes emerged, though, and behind their rousing bats, the Red Sox took over first place for good on May 16th. Fans and skeptics alike waited patiently for the Sox to fold. But pennant flames persisted thanks to Roger Clemens, who was never more sizzling than on April 29th at Fenway when he fanned 19 Seattle batters and then stood 1 strike away from the record books.
A new record. Clemens has set a major league record for strikeouts in a game. 20.
If Clemens almost single-handedly succeeded in bringing prosperity to Red Sox pitching, Dennis Oil Can Boyd and left-hander Bruce Hurst proved worthy accomplices. At last, the Sox not only had pitching, but they had enough to carry them all the way to a division title.
The high pop-up. This may do it. Buckner is there. It's all over. The Red Sox are the new division champions.
Having settled the East, the Red Sox would now take on the West Division winning California Angels to decide the pennant. Feisty opponents, the Angels went into Game 5 about to bury Boston. After 8 innings, the Sox trailed by 4 runs. They scored twice in the 9th, but with 2 outs, victory was in California's pocket. Then Dave Henderson came up and on a 2-2 count sent shockwaves through every Red Sox fan. It was a moment no Sox fan could ever forget.
One of our biggest thrills was being in the parking lot at Sullivan Stadium when Dave Henderson hit his home run. And, of course, all the guys were tailgating, and they all had their little mini TVs or Walkmans or what have you, you know, and they were listening to the Sox game. And all of a sudden, this roar came out on the parking lot, and it was worse than whatever had been inside. And we just knew that something great had happened. You know, we were asking one of the guys, and they said, Henderson hit the home run, Henderson hit the home run.
Henderson's home run lifted the Red Sox out of their grave and propelled them to the pennant. Their next destination, New York's Shea Stadium and the World Series. With 108 wins in the regular season, the Mets figured to ease past the Red Sox. But in Game 1, Rich Gedman snapped a scoreless tie in the 7th with help from Tim Tuffle. The error led to the only run of the game as Boston won the opener. With Mets offense still flat in Game 2, the team that dominated baseball all season long looked worried. With good reason, it turned out. The Red Sox rocked Shea with 18 hits and 9 runs in all. Beating New York 9-3, the Red Sox headed home with a 2-0 series lead over the dumbfounded Mets. Game 3 brought great expectations. But after former Speaker Tip O'Neill raised the curtain on the game, the Mets raised a ruckus with their bats. Emerging from their swoon, they scored 4 runs in the first and went on to beat Boston 7-1. Met bats were still crackling in Game 4 as Gary Carter smacked 2 home runs. In all, the Mets drenched Fenway with a shower of power. 25 hits in 2 games as New York tied the series. Henry Aaron may have expected to see more clout in Game 5, but Bruce Hurst subdued the Mets for his second series win as he brought the Red Sox 1 game from the title. As the series shifted back to New York for Game 6, the Sox began to flirt with the prospect of winning their first World Series in 68 years. In the swing early on, they led 2-0 after 2 innings. But then the Mets evened things in the 5th. Each team scored once more, and there things stood until Boston scored twice in the 10th. Then with 2 down in the bottom of the 10th, reliever Calvin Schiraldi had the Mets on the edge. But with a man on, Kevin Mitchell kept the Mets breathing. Then with the Mets 1 pitch from extinction, Ray Knight stunned the Red Sox, cutting the lead to 1 run. Bob Stanley was summoned to restore order and stop the Mets at last. But 1 out away and then 1 pitch away, Mookie Wilson saw Stanley let 1 get away. And unbelievably, the score was tied. The slings and arrows of outrageous fortune pierced the Red Sox again moments later when just a pitch away from ending the inning, the worst that could happen did. For Met fans, it was the best of times, while for Red Sox fans, especially eyewitnesses, it was an unbearable heartache.
There's nothing like being there when something happens, either in victory or defeat, because you feel it, I think, 100 times more than when you're sitting in front of a television set. And I think any Red Sox fan who was there a few months ago in Shea Stadium probably would never recover from it.
There was a terrible feeling that everybody had that I talked with that night. As you recall, we stayed on all night.
Right, yeah.
And it was, I mean, everybody was just stunned.
Yeah.
And it was like you lost somebody in your family, and here it is, only a game, only a sporting event.
I know it.
But it was so close.
It was. Yeah.
And as I've said oftentimes, and I still say it, the one thing I would not like to have on my tombstone is that he never lived to see a Red Sox World Series.
And the lights all went down in Massachusetts.
No one knows what the future holds for the Boston Garden, but for now it remains a treasure, especially to Celtic players.
I think one of the best descriptions of the Boston Garden was made by Bill Walton. He says, you know, most other places you go, it's like going to a shopping center and playing basketball. He says, going to the Boston Garden is like just going to a gym and playing basketball.
Built in 1928, the garden stands as a remembrance of things past. Inside, its hallowed walls rattle with the names and events of Celtic glories.
It's an honor for me to be identified as a Boston Celtic. And you fans made it very easy for me to play hard. From the choice seat people up to the heavens, the gala guys.
It's over. The Boston Celtics have won the World Championship in 1981.
Altavella driving the lane. He lays it up. Is blocked by Russell. Russell. What a play by Bill Russell. He gets it out deep, and Havlicek steals it over to Stan Jones. Havlicek stole the ball. It's all over. Pass goes to Havlicek. He's coming around to the left. The shot is good! The shot is good, and that's it! The ball game's over! The shot is good!
Williams to Bird again. Up fakes. Fires another three-pointer. Oh! Ties it up! 113 to 113!
ML has the big ball. 3, 2, 1, it's over!
Of all the classic games in all the Celtics seasons, none is more memorable than Game 5 of the 1976 Finals against Phoenix at the Garden. With the series tied going into the game, the Celtics played as expected, and after a stirring first half, led by 16. But then the Suns did what wasn't expected, as they scrambled to pull within 5 after 3 quarters. And finally, regulation play ended with the score all even. Phoenix was even more tenacious in overtime, thwarting Boston time and again. And when the clock ran out, the score was tied once more. In the second overtime, Phoenix gave the Celtics a sudden jolt when 2 quick baskets put the Suns ahead for only the 3rd time all game. More important, they had the lead with 5 seconds left to play. This was no time for mere garden variety strategy on the part of the Celtics.
We put JoJo in my spot. He was the first option. Dave was the second option. And generally, you don't have many more options on an emergency score play than that. So JoJo was covered, Dave was covered, and I knew what Don Nelson was thinking, being over there with the ball out of bounds. I mean, he wanted to squeeze the air out of that ball because 1001, JoJo's not open, 1002 or 3, Dave's not open, 1004. I mean, no one's coming to me. What am I going to do with this thing?
Pass goes to Havlicek. He's coming around to the left. The shot is good!
The thing is, after I had made one shot, which everyone thought won the game, I was in the locker room because in '65, when I stole the ball, I got manhandled on the floor. And the first thing that an athlete does after a wild frenzied game is get away as quickly as possible because they tore my jersey off that night. They had my pants down to my knees, and that's when I started fighting back. And I didn't want to have this happen again, so we went into the locker room, and I really had my uniform off, and someone came back in and said, we have to play 4 seconds.
In fact, there was only 1 second left. But Phoenix had purposely called an illegal timeout to cause a technical foul and get the ball back. After JoJo White converted the technical, the Celtics were up by 2. The Suns had 1 last chance and 1 last second to tie the game.
Here's Perry to Gar Hurd. Here's the jump shot. Good! It's good! It counts! Gar Hurd ties it! We'll go to the 3rd overtime. I gotta take a breather.
Tommy Heinsohn wasn't breathing too easy in the 3rd overtime as Phoenix continued to amaze. But so did JoJo White, who scored 15 of his 33 points in overtime. Still, with 3 Celtics having fouled out, it was Glenn McDonald who came off the bench to put Boston up with 3:23 left and then stuck around for more heroics.
Back out to Havlicek. Underneath to McDonald to fall away. Glenn McDonald!
The emotional pitch that night was from the depths of despair to the height of exhilaration, and usually that may happen once a game or once every month. It happened about 3 or 4 times in that particular game, and there were many people who did not see that game because they left when they thought my shot had won it. They didn't know another overtime was about to be played.
I talked to one lady who said that was the first basketball game she had ever seen live. She was surprised. I said, well, it's going to be a while before you see another one like that one to top that show.
No one could, of course. But for an encore, the Celtics went to Phoenix and wrapped up the finals in Game 6 to capture their 13th NBA championship. Celtic cheers were stilled soon after. John Havlicek, unaccustomed to losing, retired after 16 years. Other key players were gone as well, and after 1980, Dave Cowens would also call it quits.
The game wasn't that much fun to me, and when winning and losing didn't make that much difference to me, I figured it was time to leave.
I'd been playing with a very veteran group that rarely ever made a mistake, and with a lot of new people coming in, the mistakes were happening and I wasn't used to that, so I was very, concerned and upset at times, and can remember going through a few tirades, as Dave will attest to, in a timeout or during a huddle.
It wasn't hard to get a ticket for the Boston Celtics at that time, They were all, people were, Red one time, I remember he came in the locker room and he was just furious. And the reason he was furious, well, two reasons. One is that we had played somewhat pathetically, And the other was some season ticket holder came down to him and he says, hey, you could take these seats, and gave Red the tickets, tore him up like in his face, and he just went crazy.
Red recovered heartily when the Celtics drafted Larry Bird out of Indiana State, where he was named Player of the Year for the 1978-79 season. At Boston, Bird was an instant smash. On his way to Rookie of the Year honors, he helped bring about the Celtics' return to power. And in demonstrating remarkable court savvy, Bird sparked the Celtics to 3 straight division titles. The second came in 1981 when Boston was in dire straits against the 76ers in the conference finals, a memory that's alive and well in the minds of Celtic fans.
1981 Celtics playoffs, they're down 3-1 to Philly. Game 5 at the Garden. They're down by 6 points with 1:06 to go. Celtics end up winning by, I believe, 3 points.
Right.
Next game in Philadelphia, they're down 17 in the 3rd period. They rally. McHale blocks Andrew Toney's shot. I think it was at the buzzer, if I'm not mistaken. They win that game. Finally, they take it back to the Garden. Bird hits a banker from the left side, and they win the series in 7 and go on to win their first championship.
First championship since the coming of Larry Bird, that is. If Celtic fans had been looking for a new hero, their search was over. If Bird is surrounded by hyperbole, it's no wonder. A supreme all-around player, he embraces the game with a consuming passion. The only thing I don't like about basketball, he once said, is halftime. With 8 straight All-Star selections and 3 successive MVPs, this Celtic deity works in mysterious ways. Of course, Bird doesn't always do that, but he does spark the team in more ways than one.
If I go out and have a bad shooting night, but I know if I played good defense, or if I made the passes at the right time, or if I got the guys fired up in certain situations, that's probably more important to me than scoring a lot of points. I know when I play a good game. I don't care what the press think. I know the game of basketball. I've been around it for a number of years, and I know if I play good or bad.
Larry is a blue-collar worker, which people really appreciate. They see him working. He's not a player with great finesse. I mean, he'll dive to the floor, he bangs bodies, he does all those things that a working-class sort of person likes to see in an athlete.
Of course, Bird is not the only word in the Garden. Due to shrewd moves by the Celtics, Kevin McHale joined the team in 1980, along with the chief, Robert Parrish. Gone was the #1 draft pick. But here were 2 players who became the Celtics' backbone and helped carry them to 5 division titles in 6 years. Of course, to raise a championship banner in 1984, the Celtics would have to beat their arch-rival Los Angeles Lakers in the finals. And after LA won the series opener, Celtic fans were understandably worried. In Game 2, Boston again looked doomed. But with the clock running out and a Laker victory imminent, Gerald Henderson stole the ball to send the game into overtime and the Celtics on to victory. When the series shifted from Boston to Los Angeles for Game 3, the Lakers went on a wild shooting spree and beat the Celtics by 33 points. There was much ado between the 2 rivals as the balance kept swinging back and forth in the closely matched series. Boston rallied to win Game 4 in overtime, and then took the next game as well. But a Laker victory in Game 6 brought the series back to the Garden to settle the season. In Game 7, Larry Bird capped off his series MVP performance by leading the Celtics to a 111-102 victory. It was the Celtics' 7th championship over LA and their 15th overall. With their hands full in 1986, the Rockets went to the finals up against Larry Bird and the Celtics. After posting the 4th most wins ever in the regular season, Boston rolled over Houston in the first 2 games at the Garden. Once back on their own court in Houston for Game 3, the Rockets revived, winning 2 out of 3. But then it was time to head back to Boston. Game 6 at the Garden, just where Casey Jones wanted to be. As for the Celtics, the key was Larry Bird. En route to Series MVP, he scored 29 points as the Celtics cruised to victory and their 16th NBA title. Celtics' thrills were shattered days later when University of Maryland star forward Len Bias died suddenly, 2 days after the Celtics selected him as the number 2 overall pick in the draft. Tragedy gave way to triumph sometime later when Red Auerbach and the Celtics presided over the raising of a World Championship banner in the Boston Garden. With number 16, the Celtics thus maintained a dominance unparalleled in the history of the NBA. Raising banners at the Garden is a high school player's dream, especially across the river at Cambridge, Ringe, and Latin, where 7-foot Patrick Ewing commanded attention not usually given to a high school player. Though Ewing didn't start playing until the age of 12, he was the best high school player in the country by the time he became a senior, and was already being compared to the game's legends.
They used to try and compare him to Jabbar and Chamberlain, and when they did, I said, he's not Jabbar, he's not Chamberlain. If you want to compare him to somebody, compare him to the greatest of all, and that's Bill Russell. And compare him to Russell because Patrick knew how to win like Russell did. Patrick was more of a team player than either Jabbar or Chamberlain was, and his trademark was defense.
When the number 1 player and the number 1 team went on the road, there was often friction. But reflecting back on those high school days, Ewing now offers different advice.
Don't react the way I did. Take it out on them by scoring a point, getting a rebound, dunking it on them, something like that. Don't get in any fight.
Now in the NBA, Ewing has left a towering legacy back home in Cambridge.
Everybody together, get your assignment.
Get your gun.
Take a look at who's lined up where. May have some changes. Ready?
Yeah!
All right,
Get
let's go.
We got this far. This ain't stopping us now. We're going to win the next one.
1975 began an era of rising fortune for Patriot fans. New England hopes brightened as the Patriots added a splash of brilliant color to autumn afternoons. Enter the 1975 Patriots, who may not have looked much like the Minutemen, but who did help spread patriotic fervor throughout New England. Of course, coming off a 3-11 record, the Pats had to revolutionize the offense. And Chuck Fairbanks figured he had just the man to do it in quarterback Steve Grogan. A rookie in 1975, Grogan showed rare talent as a quarterback who could run with the ball. By 1976, Grogan helped refashion the Patriots, leading them to a dramatic about-face in which they went 11-3 for their first winning season in a decade. What's more, they won 6 in a row to earn a wild-card playoff berth, their first playoff in 13 years. Time to head west to face the Oakland Raiders, who had just won their 5th straight AFC Western Division title and were understandably confident. New England had handed the Raiders their only loss of the season. But Oakland made it clear on this afternoon that they were out to settle the score. Measure for measure, the Patriots simply dominated Oakland, creating gridlock at every turn. If New England went into the game with any doubts, Steve Grogan helped put them to rest. And after 3 quarters, the Pats led 21-10. But in the 4th quarter, New England fortunes began to change. Oakland pulled within 4 points, and with 57 seconds left and the Raiders driving to take the lead, a controversial call cost the Patriots dearly.
Sugar Bear came around, and just as he got there, Stabler saw him and he threw the ball up. The ball was overthrown anyway, but this was the great opportunity for the referees to call roughing the quarterback, and I think that was so insignificant at that time because it was only 2 minutes left in the game, and it was an accidental hit. If he had been flagrant, I can understand. And that changed the whole momentum of the game, cost us the Super Bowl as well as a game that was crucial to us.
The Patriots never recovered, and 5 plays later with 10 seconds left in the game, Ken Stabler squeezed through the Patriot defense for the winning score. Oakland went on to become Super Bowl champions, and the Patriots went home with dreams of what might have been. 2 years later, Darryl Stingley's NFL career ended in a nightmare. As the Patriots' much-talented wide receiver, Stingley was in the midst of a flourishing career that began when he was drafted out of Purdue in 1973. But then, in a preseason game against Oakland in 1978, Stingley was flattened by Jack Tatum.
I watched on the field as he lay there motionless, and I remember the last thing I saw him do was he reached up and he was moving his face mask. And then they told us at that time that he only had a severe pinched nerve. That's what the trainer was telling us. So we weren't as concerned if we had known then that he was paralyzed. And after the game, when they told us he was paralyzed, you would have never just seen a bunch of grown men cry as we cried then.
There was a lot of tears and a lot of sadness. A couple of guys actually got nauseous. It was an experience that I'll never forget. It was a mixture between sadness for Darryl and fear, knowing that, hey, this could happen to me.
The injury left Stingley paralyzed, and the tragedy lingered over the Patriots like a haunting refrain. But the spirits of Foxborough began to lift as New England got a taste of first place. On December 10th, the Pats had a chance to clinch their first outright title ever when the Bills came in. Down by 1 with 11 seconds left, the Pats had a foot in the door of victory.
The Patriots either win it or lose it right here. A 21-yard field goal attempt by David Posey. The ball down, the kick is up. It's good!
A 26-24 victory, and at last a division championship for New England. All, however, was not well with the Patriots. In a sudden turn of events, Chuck Fairbanks announced he would quit after the season to coach in college. The news angered many and led to Fairbanks' abrupt dismissal before the Pats' final season game in Miami.
We were in the locker room before the game, probably an hour before the game, before we were going out to warm up, 30 minutes. Coach Fairbanks is in there, and all of a sudden Mr. Sullivan walks in screaming and yelling and kicks Coach Fairbanks out of the locker room.
Fairbanks may have gotten little sympathy for his departure, but there were those who felt he arrived at his decision with great difficulty.
A big thing that happened to him that I really think changed his mind about pro ball definitely was the injury to Darryl Stingley. And when Darryl Stingley was paralyzed, that took a lot of fight out of Coach Fairbanks. He was a whole different individual. It took a lot of fight out of a lot of people. So I kind of contribute that to him really thinking about leaving and going back to another level. So that way I have to have compassion for him, because if he felt that way, he was doing what was best for himself and his family.
The Fairbanks fiasco sent the Patriots on a downward spiral. They were crushed by the Houston Oilers in the playoffs and would not find success again for another 4 years. Then, in 1982, the Patriots drove through snow, wind, and freezing temperatures to reach the playoffs. But no game that season was more memorable than December 12th when Miami came in. No score with 4:10 left in the game, the Pats decided to kick a field goal. But they couldn't see their way to the end zone. So enter the Foxborough Brushman, and one of the most infamous moments in pro football history. The Brushman cleared up the matter by giving kicker John Smith a clear path to victory. The attempt was good, as the Patriots held on for a 3-0 win and a total whitewash of the Dolphins. Resourcefulness paid off for team owner Billy Sullivan again in mid-1984, when New England hired Hall of Fame pass receiver Raymond Berry as the Pats' 9th head coach, a move that was applauded by the players.
He was a great motivator, and he built self-esteem and pride in what, when I had Coach Bryant, he said class and poise. Those are the two ingredients that I think Raymond Berry brought to the Patriots, was class and poise.
Berry also proved to be a master tactician, and in his first full year as head coach in 1985, the Patriots tied a team record with 11 wins and headed into the playoffs as a wild card entry. Now came the monumental task of winning 3 games on the road to reach the Super Bowl. Arriving at the Meadowlands for their first challenge, the Pats seemed cool and confident against the much-favored Jets. And in causing 4 turnovers, New England proved worthy opponents, upsetting the Jets for the team's first postseason win in 22 years. 1 down, 2 to go, and off to face the lordly Los Angeles Raiders. But the Silver and Black were no match for the upstart Patriots, who forced 6 turnovers and pulled off a thrilling 27-20 victory. The Patriots would now have to manufacture an upset in Miami, where they'd lost 18 straight games. No problem for the Pats, though, who had outstanding help from quarterback Tony Eason. Leading New England in the playoffs, Eason now thwarted Miami, an event Patriot fans figured on all along.
We were pretty positive that they could beat Miami in Miami. I was up there in Boston with about 100 of my friends, and we were pretty excited. We were over at Faneuil Hall Marketplace. People screaming, "Squish the fish," and "Kill Marino," and it was just really something to behold. You had to be there really to catch the feeling.
In a remarkable performance in which the Patriots scored 21 unanswered points and controlled the ball for 40 minutes, New England won the AFC title and headed to New Orleans for Super Bowl 20. But the grand prize would elude the Pats as they crumbled at the hands of the Chicago Bears, losing 46-10 to the Super Bowl champs. From big league heartache to Ivy League heroics between Harvard and Yale, a century-old tradition that often features a surprise or two. As in the 1979 contest at the Yale Bowl, in which Harvard, despite only 2 wins, pulled off a stunning upset to ruin Yale's spotless 8-0 record. Of course, what would the Harvard-Yale game be without the party-crashing antics of MIT, such as this truly explosive prank in the '82 game? MIT intrusions are fairly recent, but the Harvard-Yale game is nothing new. In fact, in 1983, the 2 teams celebrated the game's 100th anniversary in New Haven, where Harvard beat its rival. As for the century totals, Yale 54 wins, Harvard 38, and 8 ties. Now to an unforgettable collegiate finish, courtesy of Doug Flutie. On his way to becoming the NCAA's all-time total yardage champ in 1984, Flutie threw a 48-yard touchdown pass with no time left to beat Miami and answer BC's prayers for a Cotton Bowl berth. Gold and black, the colors of the Boston Bruins. The colors that hang from the garden rafters, each a representation of past accomplishments.
A lot of times you'll just walk around and just look and look at all the banners, and it does. Every one of those up there almost brings back some type of memory for me.
Memories of Bobby Orr, a brilliant comet that streaked across the Boston sky, phenomenal and brief. From 1966 to 75, Orr helped lead the Bruins to 2 Stanley Cups, revolutionizing the role of a defenseman along the way. But damaged knees were Orr's undoing. By 1975, it was clear his greatness would never be the same. That same season, Johnny Busick was still going strong, on his way to goal number 500 in a game against St. Louis.
I broke in on Belanger and took one look at him and fired it, went between his legs, and I think before he knew the puck was in the net, I was in the net digging that puck out of there. I wanted that puck. That was my souvenir, and I got it, and it's mounted and hanging up in my wall.
Sometime before Busick's achievement, the same milestone was passed by Phil Esposito. 500 career goals were a natural for the great Bruins center, who had taken scoring into a new dimension. But on November 7th, 1975, Espo and defenseman Carl Vadnais were traded to the New York Rangers.
Sometimes you're faced with decisions that you know you don't really want to make because the personalities involved and the people involved. But then you say, will this help the hockey club? Is this in the best interest of the owners and the team and the fans? And if you arrive at the decision that it will, and then you don't go through with it, then you're really not doing your job. We felt that the time might be right to move Phil Esposito, who was one of our greatest players, and that if we were ever going to be able to get a fair return for Phil, now is the time to do it.
Jean Rattel and Brad Park came to Boston in hockey's most famous trade. When the shock wore off, it was clear that this pair could help. Rattel was a fine playmaker, and if Bobby Orr couldn't skate, Brad Park was the defenseman to have. Slowly, the team came together under coach Don Cherry. Outspoken and flamboyant, Cherry got it done his way.
Stay on, left wing. Stay back on the point. Dash right wing. Give me Rick, give me Rick, give me Rick. Right now, Chef's fine, let's go. Fence, let's go. Chucky Fence, they're tired. Give me Jokey. Jokey!
He had a team of guys that would fight for him, that would work for him, do anything he wanted. He'd never go out there and tell you to start a fight or anything like that, but he wanted to go out and hit somebody and throw a body check. We had a lot of games. He says, anybody's carrying that puck and you're near him, I want you to hit him.
The rise of the Lunch Pail Gang was evident by the 1977 Stanley Cup playoffs. In the semifinals against the Philadelphia Flyers, the Bruins were at their hard-working best, winning twice in overtime on their way to a 4-game sweep. Moving on to the finals, the Bruins faced Scotty Bowman and his Montreal Canadiens, the defending champions. But here, the Canadiens were overwhelming, pulling off a sweep of their own with the cup-winning goal coming in overtime of Game 4. Perhaps worse than suffering a sweep was having to watch the Canadiens parade the cup on the Garden ice. Led by the likes of Terry O'Reilly, Brad Park, Wayne Cashman, and Gerry Cheevers, the Bruins were back in the finals again in 1978, again with the Canadiens. One unforgettable moment came in overtime of Game 2, when Cheevers lost his goal stick but refused to yield his ground in the face of an onslaught.
I just had to keep scrambling to try and save the puck. Without a stick, it's tough, and I kept falling and it kept hitting me, and you know, you had to keep trying because it was overtime. Despite the heroics, Guy Lafleur won the game with a slap shot that would prove all too familiar. The Canadiens were on their way to another championship, but it would in fact come a little harder. Boston fell in 6, a Bruins Stanley Cup slipping out of reach, and once again, Garden fans would have to endure the sight of another Montreal victory celebration. 1979 was a bittersweet season, augured perhaps by the night Bobby Orr returned to Boston for the retirement of his number. It was an evening to thank Bobby, both for his accomplishments and the wonderful impact he had on the game. What an emotional time it was, and the memories are still fresh.
He stepped up to the microphone, and I mean, he kept stepping up and going back away because the Garden was just so loud, he couldn't even talk. And then finally everyone started chanting, put it on, you know, referring to the jersey. And sure enough, he put the jersey on over his suit, and they must have given him at least a 5-minute standing out. The place was literally rocking. It was one of those things that while you're watching it, you knew at the time that it was something that you would remember for the rest of your life.
The '79 Stanley Cup playoffs brought the inevitable, another matchup with Montreal. This time it was in the semis, and this time it looked good.
Score!
Rattel from Rick Middleton. A hot trick, a beautiful play as John Rattel gives the Bruins the victory.
Each team would win 3 times at home, setting up a 7th and final game in Montreal. A game that would rivet its way into hockey history. The score is 3-3 late in the third period as the Bruins attack. Seizing an opportunity, Rick Middleton works his way around the net, beats Ken Dryden, and the Bruins take a 4-3 lead.
I thought, boy, we got it now. There's only 3 minutes left, and we were outplaying them, if I remember correctly. We were still ready to win the game at that point. It looked like we were in pretty good control.
But the Bruins are soon penalized for too many men on the ice, an unbelievable team error that gave the Canadiens a chance. Yet the penalty was undeniable.
I didn't see 6 men on the ice. I saw 7 men on the ice. It was a legit call. John D'Amico was the linesman. He's an old pro linesman. Unless it was completely 100% obvious, he wouldn't call it.
Now Montreal seizes the moment in the form of Guy Lafleur, whose slap shot beats Gilles Gilbert for the tying goal. Gilbert had played brilliantly in the Boston Nets, and it's clear that Lafleur's split-second timing was near unstoppable. In the overtime period, the Bruins carry the early action, barely missing on some quick chances. Soon, both teams go beyond exhaustion, playing on a mixture of passion and desperation. Finally, nearly 10 minutes in, a chance develops as Mario Tremblay streaks in and finds an all-too-ready Yvon Lambert. In one terrible moment, the Bruins are undone.
It was disbelief that we would have come that far and that close and been in such good position to win. To come up empty-handed was a bitter pill.
That, to me, was the toughest loss I ever suffered, and I didn't play. Thank God I didn't play that game. I might have committed suicide. I never saw a team so shocked from losing in all my life.
The Montreal experiences of this team and myself, and I've really been the only common denominator for the Bruins, have been enough to exhaust you for a lifetime.
By 1980, the Bruins sought a new course, with Gerry Cheevers going behind the bench to become the team's coach. At the same time, a 20-year-old defenseman named Ray Bourque was emerging as one of the game's brightest young talents. Not surprisingly, the Bruins under Cheevers were both talented and pugnacious. In February of 1981, in a game against the North Stars, a league record was set with 84 penalties, totaling an incredible 406 minutes. In the first period alone, there were a record-setting 67 penalties, including 13 game misconducts. Ironically, this night it was the North Stars who initiated much of the fighting. And while it certainly wasn't pretty, Boston would not back down. The Bruins have traditionally been a close-knit group. That closeness and fellow feeling were particularly evident in the sad set of circumstances that befell young Normand Leveillé, an outstanding first-round draft pick. On October 23, 1982, Leveillé suffered a cerebral hemorrhage in a game at Vancouver.
We had a vigil, more or less, at the hotel because he was hovering on life and death at the time. It's an awful price, but it brought the team together. As soon as they had the answer to Norman that he was going to live and be all right.
The harrowing experience of Normand Leveillé had galvanized the Boston club. The Bruins would go on to finish the 82-83 season with 110 points, the most in the league. And that was thanks in large part to goaltender Pete Peters, winner that season of the Vezina Trophy. Expectations were high for the playoffs, but the second round came down to a Game 7 overtime.
Here's Park, the draw, the shot. It trickles in. It's knocked away. Park with it. Scores! Brad Park wins the game. Brad Park, a rebound, and the Bruins win 3-2.
The dramatic victory over the Buffalo Sabres again stoked the Stanley Cup fires, but heartache would inevitably follow. In the semifinals, the New York Islanders went on to deflate Boston's Stanley Cup aspirations in 6 games. And over the next 3 years, the Bruins fell upon hard times, suffering elimination from the first round of the playoffs each season. But in 1986, when Terry O'Reilly was named as coach, there was new reason to hope the Bruins might once again succeed. As a player, O'Reilly combined fierceness and self-sacrifice, 2 qualities again demanded of his own men, as they set their sights on a winning future for Boston Bruins hockey. Hockey in Boston also means the amateurs. And nothing beats the time when Boston College, Boston University, Harvard, and Northeastern get together once a year for the Beanpot tournament, where there's no telling who's going to win.
Beanpot has forever been nothing but upsets. BC comes in every year the favorite, and BC never wins.
BC was close to winning in 1980, but upstart Northeastern rocked the Boston Garden sellout with stirring play in overtime, and then ended a 27-year drought to win its first ever Beanpot tournament. The Beanpot maintained its reputation for the unexpected in 1987, when BU and Northeastern made it to the finals. Then, with its usual hometown heroics, the game saw both teams put on a spirited show that came to a rousing finish when BU brought down the house with a 4-3 overtime win. Just another ho-hum Beanpot finish. Now to the start of the Boston Marathon. 26 miles, 385 yards from the finish. An annual rite of spring in New England since 1897, the race attracts the world's top runners.
I think the Boston Marathon is the most important marathon and the most prestigious to win. Its course is really a beautifully designed course. The crowds grow and grow, because for the first 5 miles or so, it's through Hopkinton and Ashland, these small rural towns, and there's not too many people. But they're there, they cheer you on still, and they're maybe sipping a beer, or barbecuing food, and they're enjoying the holiday and cheering on the runners like they've done for years. And then you get to Framingham, and suddenly there's 10, 20, 30,000 people, and then Natick, and it's another 30,000, 40,000. They're 3 feet away.
Ever since 1975, when he emerged from obscurity to win the Boston Marathon, Bill Rogers has become a fixture of the race. Of course, winning this race is no small thing. Witness, for example, 1978, when Rogers was in the lead.
I broke away around 18 miles, I guess, something like that, and thought I had the race won because a motorcycle cop told me there was no one behind me, and I couldn't see anyone. And another half a mile down the road, I was only a mile from the finish, suddenly there was a guy right there, and he was gaining on me. And I really got nervous because I was tired. I'm dead tired, and this guy's getting closer and closer and closer. And he came within 2 seconds of catching me. And if I had another 10 yards to go, he would have beaten me.
Rogers won the race by 2 seconds, the closest finish ever, and for Boston's local hero, his toughest yet. The next year, he set an American record, and then in 1979, Rogers secured his status in the world of long-distance running with his 3rd straight marathon win and 4th overall.
He is quite simply the best. From Sherburne, Massachusetts, and the Greater Boston Track Club, the king of the roads, this is Bill Rogers!
The victory put Rogers alongside only one other 4-time winner in the history of the Boston Marathon. If Rogers is New England's king of the road, Maine resident Joan Benoit is the queen. She set an American women's mark in the 1979 Boston Marathon, and then topped that with an outstanding run in 1983, when she set a world record. From Joan Benoit to Carlton Fisk, these 12 years of Boston sports make up a treasury of unforgettable moments that touch New Englanders from Maine to Connecticut. Here in Boston, fervent loyalties are indestructible. They survive the heartaches and embrace the heroes.
I've grown to love Boston as a city because of all the great nostalgia that's been through there, and the people. They're hard baseball people. They will get on you, but they're hungry and they want a winner, and they want people to perform well.
We come to play, we play hard, and they expect us to play hard, and it's just from them having knowledge of the game. It's a very special place to play.
There's always a lot of positive feeling. People are always in a good mood, and they just, they really support the runners. That plays a big role, I think, in the runners wanting to return to Boston every year.
Boston, to me, is one of the best cities when it comes to supporting their clubs.
I think we have a responsibility here to put on the ice for our fans the type of team that they've told us they want to watch. And I'm happy when that happens. You can't win all the games, you can't win championships, but you do have a responsibility to put forth for them a pretty competitive, aggressive, that's the type of town this is.
I spent 10 years here in Boston, and they're the 10 best years of my life.
Here's the pitch to Yaz. A long drive to right field. That's gone. Number 400. No doubt about it. There it goes.
Pass goes to Havlicek. He's coming around to the left. The shot is gone.